Fiskerma Huladunia is Misha Virginia, aka Orange Zeppelin. I guess Hami Agunsach Gaelic na Halaba. Kerson, because it's frickin' cool. The very first language I ever studied back in high school was classical Latin, which I unfortunately never kept up with, despite the fact that I very much loved the language, and my teacher still stands as one of my favorites from high school. Also, he looked exactly like this painting. The study of Latin solidified my love of learning languages, especially ones that most people would define as completely useless. This is definitely not true for Latin. Conversationally, you might not get to use a lot of Latin except maybe with Catholic priests, but there's a huge amount of Latin influence in English, and even more so in Romance languages like Spanish, which I did take a little bit of in high school, and I found very easy after being brutally assaulted with the onslaught of Latin grammar for 3 years. Incidentally, if you want to know what kind of people take Latin in high school, my teacher was looking out on a sea of Iron Maiden shirts every class. I took a little German in college, and while I enjoyed all of these languages, I never really kept up with them because honestly, I had a hard time doing so outside of a class setting, and I was always self-conscious trying to use them even just in writing. I was always afraid of messing up. My attempts to write in Latin could have gotten me fed to lions in Nero's time. It's a long story of exactly how I stumbled into Scottish Gaelic or Gaelic, but partly it was due to the fact that if you tell me something is really hard and possibly useless, I'm going to jump right into it. But just like with Latin, Gaelic isn't useless. There is an entire 1% of the Scottish population that you can now have conversations with about liking socks. I can now become pen pals with an 80-year-old herring fisherman from Eriskay. But to be serious, as long as you're having fun, and especially if you are contributing to a relatively small language learning community, you aren't wasting your time. And at the end of the day, I don't really think I actually care how useful it is. That's the number one critique people give on learning Gaelic as a language, is that it's not useful. I don't care. I think that they're just jealous because they can't spell words like Jiham. I can't spell Jiham, but that's quite beside the point. The other thing that holds people back from learning Gaelic, and I think from learning a lot of different languages, is this idea that Gaelic is super, super hard to learn, and I haven't found that to really be the case. Between the OWL app, the other OWL app, several learning sites, this guy, BBC Alaba, Radio na Gael, random Facebook meme pages, and many, many more, you've actually got some decent resources at your disposal. But at the end of the day, the best way to practice a language and to keep it is to actually use it. And I prefer to do it the old-fashioned way. While it is still very helpful to practice a new language through typing, there does seem to be a different tactile experience when you handwrite things. Writing has been shown to commit information to memory better, especially if you do it every day. I've been using the Hobonichi 5-year journal for 2 years now, and I just recently posted a video showing off what I've been doing over the past year, but I'll share some specifics. Some helpful vocabulary to use for journaling for any language at all would include things like month names, days of the week, things like the weather, words like today, yesterday, tomorrow. This is also a good way to practice writing in different tenses, saying things like, I was doing this, I am doing this, I will do this, etc. Definitely treat yourself to some nice pens and materials to make your writing process more of a treat. I have a strategy of switching my pen color when I need to switch back to English, whether it be due to a gap in my vocabulary or because there isn't a Gaelic word for tamagoyaki. I've also got a list of resources in the back. This includes websites, apps, YouTube channels, just to help me in my journey. I have a bad habit of falling back on Duolingo when there's a lot of better sources out there that don't guilt trip me when I want to take a day off. Now, inevitably, you will find yourself making mistakes. I know it's very surprising, but I do occasionally misspell things like a Geiger. You're gonna lenite things that have no business being lenited. You may even mistake a word like union and unyeg. I've made a terrible mistake. But mistakes are okay, and it's how we learn, and it happens to the best of us. The beautiful Isle of Bute in Scotland made a mistake on one of their own welcome signs, and it's not like that radically changed the name of the island or anything. The beauty of the 5-year system is you can track your own improvement. I might go back and correct an entry I made on the previous day, but as a rule, I don't fix anything older than that. I want to see what my mistakes were in the past, and I want to track how my progress has been. Also, you can track stagnation if you're finding you're writing the same thing fairly often. I've actually set a rule for myself in 2024 that I'm not allowed to write variants of Hami ski anymore. I've already cheated a little and wrote Hami Gàidhlig. As of 2024, I'm also bringing Gaelic into my workout and health planner. This setup is focused around time blocking, and it's actually the first time I've tried a planner with specific printed times. Here I'm planning workout schedules, and I'm using basic verbs, noting when my meal times are, when my work days are, and specific self-care things like reading, playing Skyrim. This is a really good place to practice the imperative form of verbs, which is what you'd be using if you were, say, giving a command. Eat breakfast, run, lift, go and get McDonald's. I've been using tug as the verb for lifting to refer to my weightlifting, and I also kept accidentally giving it an accent mark for some reason in this spread. But as I was filming this page, I did find some more proper Gaelic words for weightlifting and strength training. I added those words into a new word list in the back of this planner that I can add to later as I come across more helpful words. This kind of makes me curious how many workout terms I can find in Gaelic, or just how a lot of workout terms get translated into other languages. I know that classical Greek has a lot of words relating to fitness and exercise. I would think Gaelic wouldn't be much different considering the strong cultural tradition of lifting very heavy rocks. I also added in a reading tracker in the back of this. It is very simple. While I like the very detailed, beautiful reading journals people make here on YouTube, I personally hate anything that makes reading more complicated than grabbing a book and reading the damn thing. The most complex part of this tracker is trying to pronounce Laurelan. For my daily planner, I track my chores, active projects, and work schedule, again using imperative verbs, but I do also include Gaelic in the days of the week, the months, and I am noting what my study goal for the week is. Cute stickers and stamps are not required, but they do help. For tracking your errands, you could build a list of words like library, bank, and post office. I personally like to use pen for my planning because to me it adds an element of permanence, so I'm less inclined to deviate from my plan. That will still happen sometimes, but the pen makes it feel more set in stone. And I have a personality that absolutely hates change, so if it's in pen, the plan can't be altered. I once had a conversation with someone online about a person they had worked with who was very much a manipulative person, someone who liked to change plans to inconvenience other people, and this actually showed in how they used their work planner. They would only use pencil with the absolute lightest touch and written microscopically small, as if they were afraid to even write it. And that's because if the plan was in pen, written clearly, it was set in stone and it couldn't be manipulated. So this is why you should use pens, folks. Pisses off people with personality disorders. Last but not least, I've got a journal which I use for meal planning. This is used and consulted by the whole family, and the whole family is actually learning Gaelic right now. Here we keep track of the food we have on hand, any holidays coming up, and meal ideas so we aren't struggling to decide what to make for dinner. I'll be a Kinnach pizza at a computer. What a time to be alive! Each day I've written out our plans as a full Gaelic sentence. I've also included a section in the back, much like with what I started in my workout planner. I have words that might frequently appear in our plans here. Also, I lied, I also have another planner, but that one's at work. I keep that one in English in case my fellow employees need to consult it and are wondering what the hell Fimi Shinna via Kinnach Pokemon cards means. So aside from planning and journaling, what else can you do to practice written output? I've looked up simple writing prompts for language learning or just for early grade children. Do not be afraid to write something really stupid. I have written Dragon Quest XI fanfiction as Gaelic practice. It's written at a toddler level, but I wrote it, and it's definitely the first ever Gaelic language fanfiction about the great Sylvando visiting a bakery. I use Animal Crossing quite a bit in Gaelic practice. I write letters to my villagers. Bonus points if you do this in an older game because they'll send you back a letter asking if you had a stroke while writing it. Above all else, it's important to remember that language learning is about repetition. People often think it's about an innate talent or intelligence, and while maybe that's true, I think it's more about how stubborn you are. It's about looking at something like this and saying, I will pound my head against a textbook for as long as it takes to figure this out. I will make the same grammar mistake several times until I understand why it's wrong. To look at something like a Latin declension chart and say, I'm not afraid, takes the ironclad resolve of a net-wielding gladiator facing off against an angry lion. It is that same resolve that made my Latin teacher all those years ago, with his immaculately pressed suits and immaculately waxed mustache, gaze upon a class full of reprobates dressed as though they were headed to a thrash metal concert and say, they can be taught the words of Virgil, they can be taught of Seneca, they can be taught the Roman virtues. And with that same resolve, I stare down a word like Gàidhlig and say, wow, that is definitely a word and not just a noise I make while choking on peanut butter. Anyway, I do hope that you enjoyed the video and found it informative. If you did, consider giving it a like and maybe subscribing for more. Comment down below if you have a language you're learning and if you also find journaling helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.